Redditors who have hired a private investigator, what did you find out? My grandmother's first boyfriend after my grandfather died said he was a retired cop and a veteran. They enjoyed dancing to country music together and bought a new car, in her name though, even though she can't drive anymore. My uncles hired a PI. Turns out, that old guy had a habit of shacking up with widows and bleeding them dry. The boyfriend, not the PI, not me but my friend, also a lawyer like myself, was handling a contested will, normally, very straightforward. Anyway, woman in her mid-30s, husband just died. He was in his late 70s or early 80s, can't remember. Still nothing fishy, because hey, nothing wrong with an adult transaction where a very good-looking young woman sleeps with a rich old man in exchange for the use of his credit cards. Here's where it gets slightly concerning. 2 months before his death, he rewrote his will and left everything to her instead of his 5 kids, around 35 million in cash and assets. And then it gets downright thriller movie-ish. Turns out, the woman is a 5-time widow. Now you may be saying, sure, that could just be the unluckiest, most pitiful widow in the world, but it gets even fishier. In all 5 of her marriages, the wills were rewritten just months before their deaths, and every cause of death was natural causes, despite not all of them being as old as the latest husband. And toxicology tests were not carried out during any of the 5 autopsies. But wait, there's more. It turned out that the widow was never home any of the deaths, yet insisted the autopsies were carried out at the same institute. But wait, still more. Widow is also distantly related to one of the higher-ups at the institute. My mother's dad walked out on mom, my aunt, and my grandmother when mom was just 5. A few years later, my grandmother died of a grand mal seizure. Mom was taken in by her grandparents, but she always wondered why her dad left and what became of him. In her 40s, she saved up a bit and hired a PI to track him down. Turns out he moved over time from Pittsburgh to California, where he wound up in prison for armed robbery and so other violent crimes. He died in San Quentin Penitentiary. I think mom got a lot of closure out of that. She was able to see that life would have most likely been even worse had he stayed, at least living with her grandparents. She was loved and raised to fulfill her potential. When I met my wife, she seemed to have a normal modern family. 2 moms, 2 dads. Over time, it became apparent her stepdad wasn't around much. Holidays, birthdays, you name it. He'd pop in to say hi, grab a nap, whatever, then take off again. My wife's family thought this was normal, just the way it had always been since they were teenagers. He claimed to have a job following FedEx trucks around the state to prevent theft and drug trafficking, but I thought it strange and started making jokes about him having another family. Well, I guess it got my sister-in-law thinking, because she gets a favor from the PI at her law firm. Sure enough, he has not 2, but 3 wives around the state, and 5 other stepchildren between them. My sister-in-law breaks the news to her mother, who immediately changes the locks and files for divorce. They never speak again. Cold turkey. Divorce is even uncontested. As a foo, they also send the reports to his other wives. Not a PI and haven't hired one, but I used to work in the office of a PI firm that specializes in insurance fraud. I would edit and sometimes write surveillance and background investigation reports that we passed along to our clients, mostly lawyers and insurance companies. One thing that never failed to surprise me: an astounding number of people who claim to suffer devastating disabilities regularly post pictures, videos of themselves running marathons and building decks in their yards. I'm comfortable saying that in at least half of the cases I handled over 2 years, our clients flagged their claimants as fraudulent because of social media. Disgruntled exes are another significant source of tips. To give an example of one of the more remarkable instances in which social media saved a case, it's summer, and on the day of surveillance, our investigator sees the claimant and his family loading their car with beach stuff. The claimant drives for a couple of hours before the investigator eventually loses sight of the vehicle. Side note: tailing someone in a vehicle without first rousing suspicion or second losing the vehicle is hard. The investigator, being way too far from his own home to drive home, checks into a motel. The next morning, he checks his phone and finds that the claimant checked in at a water park on Facebook. Investigator makes a pit stop to buy some swim trunks and a beach towel, drives to the water park, and gets hours of covert footage of the claimant swimming in a wave pool, going down water slides, picking up and putting down his kids, and generally doing a whole lot of things you probably shouldn't be able to do with a serious spine injury. My story is a little different. I had API investigate me. About 6 years ago I became very ill with a variety of issues that left me really quite poorly. I was an optician, and so using my hands with arthritis was just never going to be a plan. So I applied for UK disability support. I sailed through and started receiving a monthly amount. Now, fast forward a few years, I then start getting restless at home, so I retrain into a job that doesn't involve my hands. I stop receiving money, except for the benefit you can get while you work. I use it for paying a better automatic car off. Well, my very nasty mother's friend saw me start work and called the benefits office, assuming I was still claiming. Unfortunately, she exaggerated and told them I was living a normal life and even running daily. So the benefits office filmed and watched me. They thought they had an aha, gotcha moment. Their PI provided photos of me walking unaided. When I sat in the meeting with a lot of smug fraud officers and my solicitor, I felt sick to my stomach. I really couldn't work out what the heck was going on. They were trying to make it look like I had been running and jogging, but I knew I walked never any further than 5 meters to my car. Anyway, solicitor pointed out the photos were screenshots of a video, asked for the videos. Videos were of me struggling to walk. One of them I rest on my car before opening my door. Another I was going into a supermarket and had replaced my cane with the trolley to lean on. You get the picture. So, the fraud team basically said oops and I never heard from them again. I spend a lot of my time trying to appear normal, and it bit me in the arse. And never trust these fraud TV shows now either. Hadn't heard from my mom since I was about 15. Very unstable due to drugs and alcohol, etc. When I was 29, I decided it was time to find out what happened to her. I figured if she was a Jane Doe somewhere, then I could put her to rest. And if she was alive, then I wanted to let her know that I forgave her. Hired API to help. I guess she was moved by my story, and so she also ran info for the man. My mother was apparently married too, on the house, and with one clue from his report, I was able to track them down. I wouldn't have found my mom alive, and was just starting out on recovery after being homeless and addicted for many years. If it wasn't for the PI who kindly ran an extra report for free, Mom has remained sober now for about 7 years, and is probably the healthiest she's ever been, physically and emotionally. In his 20s, my SO hired a PI to find out what had become of the childhood bully who had made his life hell, and who had vowed to kill him. Actually, he did try by bringing a loaded gun to school, but some other kid ratted him out and the bully got expelled, but still lived in the neighborhood for a few more years, and beat up my SO every chance he got. The PI found the bully living in a town more than an hour outside the big city, in a dead-end job. He'd been arrested for assault and public drunkenness a couple times. That info helped my SO get past his fear that the guy would find him someday and make good on his threat. I used to work for an insurance defense firm years ago. Best PI story I have is where we hired one to tail a guy who was suing our client for an injury. That wasn't entirely our client's fault. The guy was refusing to settle and was insisting on going to trial, even though we offered a fair sum that would have paid his medical bills. The PI we hired got some good pics that showed the plaintiff was nowhere near as injured as he claimed, but the crown jewel of the photos was one where the guy was walking on a pier with a woman who wasn't his wife. He had his hand on her rear end and everything. Later in a deposition, the attorney slid the picture to the plaintiff and said something like Mr. Smith, obviously not his real name, who is the woman in this picture. We would like to schedule a deposition with her as well. The guy went ghost white and told his attorney he wanted to settle. At least he was smart enough to realize that if his wife found out the other woman was gonna be deposed, He was gonna have to get a family law attorney as well, because the divorce papers would soon follow. Edit. Wow, this blew up overnight. To clarify some points in the comments. No, this is not technically blackmail. Our firm had the PI follow him to see if he was faking his injuries, which is standard operating procedure. Not to see if he was cheating on his wife. We had no idea he was doing that. The fact the woman in the picture was his mistress was irrelevant. The attorney would have asked for the person's contact info, even if she were just a friend, co-worker, cousin, or whatever. The attorney wanted to depose her to ascertain the extent of the guy's injuries. At no point did the attorney say drop the suit or will out your affair to your wife. I know someone that hired a pet detective to find their cat, and he actually found him. Not mine specifically, but my mother hired one to spy on the school. See, my little brother is dyslexic and has severe social anxiety, and so was struggling a lot in a public school setting. He had an IEP, which the teachers and principal were insisting was being followed. But every day my brother would come home in tears shaking because he felt abandoned and stupid. So mom hired the investigator, and sure enough the teachers were basically just ignoring my brother. They'd sit him in the back of the room and demand he do his work, then wouldn't help him through it. Then they'd yell at him because he didn't do it again. He couldn't write because of the dyslexia, with all the evidence. My mom was able to arrange a meeting with the school board and threatened to sue. They agreed to pay his tuition for a private school. That was supposed to help. It didn't, and mom ended up just pulling him out and homeschooling him. He's been doing a lot better. Tell a story about investigations that you know in the comments, and don't forget to subscribe for more. Bye.